Python versus JavaScript, syntax comparison. What is easier to read? What is easier to type? Let's dive in. Variable declaration, obviously Python is going to be a clear winner. You do not have to declare types. You simply create a variable name equals and assign it any object you wish. JavaScript, on the other hand, is at least better than statically typed languages in that you do not need to declare actual types. You do, however, need to declare whether it's an immutable or a constant or a mutable object. And let us not forget the ever-present end-of-line characters in most languages other than Python. Python would be a clear winner in this regard. More data types, more of the same, Python clear winner. So for sequence types, arrays and lists, you still need the constant keyword here when you're creating the actual array, but the other syntax is very similar. And then the other functions are similar as well. The one thing of note here in this regard is when you're going to print a standard output, print is definitely more readable and shorter to type than console log. So Python wins again. For dictionaries, however, Python is the clear loser in that when you're creating a dictionary in Python, you do need to utilize quotation marks when you're making string keywords. So here you need to have the quotation marks, as well as when you are calling up that key value pair, whether you're going to utilize it in code or assign to it, you need to use square brackets and the string with the quotation marks. Definitely more cumbersome than simply using a variable name here that automatically turns into a string and using dot notation to assign or call up that key value pair. So JavaScript wins in this regard. Function declaration, I would say that the one thing that JavaScript has going for it is that function is easier to understand what is being meant to do with the code versus the def statement. However, let us not forget that function definitions require these curly braces to enclose the executable code within that function, and then the ever-present end-of-line character. So Python is a clear winner here. Anonymous functions are a bit less straightforward in that this syntax can be difficult to understand for a newcomer, as can this syntax. Here you have the lambda function arguments, and then you have the colon, and then the returnable line or executable line of code. Here you're simply using an equals sign, parentheses enclosed arguments, and then you have the equals and the greater than symbol for your executable line of code. I would say this is a tie, except for when you're doing it inline, because that's a bit more cumbersome than simply doing the key equals lambda x length of x. Control flow, again, Python does not require enclosing parentheses around your conditional statements, nor does it require curly braces around your executable lines of code after these if, elif, else statements. And let us not forget that else if is a bit more to type than elif. So Python would win in this regard. Looping. Nothing has as of yet really beaten the utility of the range built-in function. Simply put range and then length of your array, and then you can loop through them by index. As well as, let us not forget the ease of use for looping through objects directly. For fruit or any variable name you choose, it could be x in fruits, and then you have direct access to each object within that fruits array or sequence. And then if you wish to get access to both, you can use similar syntax and use enumerate to gain access to both the object and the index at the same time. Here, they're utilizing the standard format for looping structures that Java and C++ uses. A bit more cumbersome, difficult for the newcomer to understand, a little bit less straightforward, and as always, the enclosing curly braces around your executable code. Definitely clear winner would be Python in that regard. Class definition, a bit less straightforward. One could argue that it is easier to understand and separate out things with the def statements here for the constructor. You need to include the self argument in the constructor as well as for methods that are going to be utilized on the instance level. But here you can utilize decorators for class methods and static methods, which in my opinion makes things a bit clearer to understand than what is happening here. Here you don't need to utilize the self within the constructor itself or in the methods, but you need to utilize this keyword. So that's very similar, but you do not need to add it in as an argument. However, when you get down to trying to make a class method or a static method, things become a bit more cumbersome to manage. And let us not forget all of the enclosing braces here, making things longer and a bit less readable. So I would say Python is a winner in this regard as well. Error handling is what we're going to end on. And again, very similar in its construction. However, the enclosing braces here for each try, catch, and exception is a bit more cumbersome than Python. Python, clear winner again, I would say. But let us go over one more time that Python for the dictionary is less suitable than JavaScript. Thanks for joining.